All right, Durham Church. Grateful to be with everybody this morning. How's everybody doing? It's a more robust turnout than I was expecting. Without our charismatic leader, Franklin Golden. When he was going out on sabbatical and starts sending around the list, sign up, preach. I thought, okay. And then the moment came. Right, TJ? We're at James Joyce last night. It's 10:30 or 11. Thinking, I got to preach in the morning. Where do I find my muse? At 11 o'clock at night on a Saturday. I had been grappling with what message to share with you, and some of you may know I had surgery right before Thanksgiving, and as I told the surgeon on Friday, I said, you really undersold this. Way undersold this. I was out of commission for like 10 days, missed a week of work. I didn't know. They didn't put in the instructions, you can't fly, so I missed Army Battle Assembly, etc. But as I was grappling with what to talk about today, and Franklin had shared, he's not violating his sabbatical, I promise you, but he shared, there's a lot in the Bible about physical pain. I don't know, maybe not yet, but I signed up again in January, so maybe we'll get to the surgery in January. No, was having a conversation with a very dear friend about moral and ethical accountability. And that's kind of where I am this morning, right? Right? It's very different trajectory. And that conversation intersected with, I was listening to an interview maybe a week or so ago, and former President Bill Clinton was talking about totally unrelated things, and he says somewhere in this conversation, none of us is running a perfect life. I said, from your lips to God's ears. But there is in this conversation, I think, a lot to think about where accountability morally and ethically comes from. And so I've gone down this path, have some thoughts. I'll share them with you. I frankly would love this to be a dialogue because I want to learn, and I don't know that bringing a word is the best way. I got the dictionary, of course. What is accountability? It's an obligation or willingness to accept responsibility or to account for one's actions. Interestingly enough, Webster's says that the first use of the word accountability, at least in the English language, is recorded in the 1750s. That struck me as odd. There sure is a lot in the Bible about accountability. Maybe there are other words for it. But if we think about this dictionary definition, how we encounter it, it suggests that there's a standard, that we aren't meeting that standard, and either from inside or outside, we are evaluated and corrected for missing that standard, falling short of that standard. As Christians, of course, we think about the ultimate accountability, Judgment Day, Peter, the pearly gates, and having to account for a life and how we live it, having to be evaluated in our totality. We have images, I'm sure, in our heads of Dante's Divine Comedy about whether we'll be in purgatory, whether we will achieve heaven, or whether we will end up in one of these gruesome, very vivid levels of hell. And so I think we have these Christian-based concepts about Judgment Day and accountability on Judgment Day. But I'm more interested in moral and ethical accountability today. How we lead our lives today, not towards a Judgment Day, but on this Sunday, December 15th, 2024. In the broader context of human relations in the moral sphere, how do we have accountability? If we don't do right, when we know what right is, when we tell that little white lie for the greater good, when we break that commandment, or when we walk past that person in need and don't stop. we're all very familiar with the concept of accountability in our daily lives. Think about work. At work, we trade hours for a paycheck. We're expected to do certain things in exchange for that bargain. If you're slacking off, I had a call from a longtime dear friend. She had perhaps generated a little too much conflict in the workplace. She broke the bargain. She was held accountable. They asked her to leave. You don't do your job, you don't get the paycheck. There is an accountability in the workplace. Think about school. Think about the accountability we experience in our school lives, the dread we see on the faces of our children when it's test day. We're truly, whether or not they've been paying attention, learning the subject matter, learning those analytical skills, they're held to account. And we are literally graded on whether or not we have gotten the stuff that we are to be getting. We're very familiar with accountability at school, at work. In society, we are familiar with accountability to the law. Got a wonderful young 19-year-old. Every once in a while, I just volunteer to help out when I see somebody needs a little extra help. His parents had been urging him all through his teenage years, get out of the house, make friends, stop playing video games. So he went to NC State, and that's what he did. He joined a fraternity house. The next thing you know, at 2 o'clock in the morning, the phone rings, and Edgecombe County Sheriff's Department has him. Why? Because he was trying to pull up a street sign. And I don't know if you know much about street signs, but they're incredibly difficult to get out of the ground. The photos from the sheriff's department show the chain wrapped around the back of the pickup truck, and poor client friend happened to be doing this in the front yard of an Edgecombe County sheriff captain. So getting out of the house and making friends had gone awry. He was charged. Of course, when I called the district attorney's office, even the secretary who answered the phone says, ha, 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 haven't we all stolen street signs? And I thought, well, yeah, the statute of limitations is run. I remember that night right outside of Lexington. So we're familiar with accountability. You know, he's going to write a term paper. He's going to pay for the cost of the sign. And his embarrassment is probably a greater accountability. But the process we're all familiar with. We see it in the news every day. We may have experienced it in our own lives. When we err from what society expects, there is criminal and civil accountability. In politics, we talk about accountability all the time, don't we? Holding elected officials accountable when they don't do what either they say that they are going to do or get out of line with the public will and what we think is in the public interest. When a piece of legislation about dental health gets turned into a conversation about hurricane relief, but it's really just a partisan grab. We petition, we call, we write. Sometimes we go over to the legislative building and we make a ruckus as part of holding elected officials accountable. And we are particularly offended when the rules of the game are rigged, the districts are drawn in such a way that the mechanisms of accountability are broken down, when there's insulation from the public will, especially in our elected officials. But we're so familiar with accountability and how that works in politics. Think about accountability in friendships. When a dear friend has very serious life choices in front of her, and she knows she needs to do them. She also has 2 kids, 3 jobs, is constantly scrambling to make it through the day. Accountability can look like the gentle nudge to put those major life choices first, her health and her well-being first, not by retribution, like in a criminal context, not in like a political context, but the gentle nudges, the loving nudges of a friend to do the right thing, to prioritize the right things. We think about how those moments both are a facet of friendship and reinforce friendship. They strain the moment, but they create a more enduring relationship. These things are how we think about accountability day to day. We encounter it in our daily lives. Where, though, does moral and ethical accountability come from? If we think about society, there is very little. There's certainly no tickets being handed out for moral failure. There is nobody grading us in the moment in our daily lives. There's nobody exchanging a paycheck for moral and ethical behavior. Where does it come from? When I dive into the Bible, I find Matthew 12:36-37. I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak. Well, we're talking about St. Peter again. Romans 14:12. So then, each of us will give an account of ourselves to God. I'm still thinking what I'm hearing here is about the summation of a life, not December 15th, 2024. 2 Corinthians 5, for we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ. A lot of this is like, let's Google account and accountability in the Bible. Well, if Webster's right, and the first use of that word is in the 1750s, we're already sort of at a loss. So I've been grappling with this. There's something about moral accountability that is uniquely intrinsic, isn't it? There, again, isn't anybody handing out tickets or exchanging paychecks. It's coming from within. We have to want moral and ethical accountability. In some part of the Christian tradition, confession is a full sacrament where you sit in an isolated place with a priest. You open up about the ways in which you know you're supposed to conduct yourself but have fallen short. You are in that connection, priest and penitent, held accountable, given a penance, something to carry out, to try to cleanse yourself. I think there's something, though, very special and unique about the Presbyterian tradition. When we come together as a church, we choose to walk in this door. We choose to put ourselves in relation with each other in this community. We think about the relationship bless you. We think about the relationship in and amongst ourselves. We choose this community. Probably, perhaps, this is reflecting on my own self, because we care to have a moral and ethical, a Christian accountability. And when we come in this door, part of our tradition is to have a corporate group confession. Doesn't accountability always begin with transparency about the truth, about an acknowledgement that we're all fallen, nobody's running a perfect life here, that there's a standard, a calling, a set of things that we aspire to be, to take care of the person who needs help, to love each other. There are commandments and admonitions, none greater than the relationship we have with each other and the love that we have for each other. I think while society and at large, there are few, if any, extrinsic means of moral and ethical accountability, we can choose that in who we come together with. Isn't that part of what this community is all about? What makes Durham Church special? The vulnerability we bring to each other, the way that we open up to each other about our needs, about our aspirations, about the ways that we know we can be better. So even at a time when our fearless leader, Franklin, isn't with us, I'm actually really heartened to see us each choosing to walk in this door and be part of a community where lovingly we can hold each other accountable, we can aspire to be better, we can fulfill the calling that we're all brought to, and that is to live out our Christian faith, not because someday we will all stand in front of that pearly gate, but because today we feel and we choose a moral and an ethical calling. And that's a beautiful thing. Let's celebrate that. Amen.